I would expect that the German government issue an official statement acknowledging the crimes, acknowledging the impact on the people, and also expressing the willingness to, I would not say amend, but to engage very constructively with the state and communities in redressing or addressing these colonial crimes. But that also looks to me like constructive action.
Welcome to the podcast Decolonial Memories. I am Thomas Fuß. Today I talk to Sylvie Vernyuy Njobati. Sylvie is the founder president of the cultural organization Regardless in Cameroon. I'm absolutely honored and thrilled to be talking to Sylvie Vernyuy Njobati. Welcome, Sylvie.
Thank you, Thomas.
Let's start with the personal side. Where did you grow up?
I was born in 1991. At the time, my mother was in school. She was a student studying to actually become a teacher. And so because of the fact that she was in university, she had to take me to my grandmother and my grandfather in Messager at the time, who then raised me. I lived most of my life in So, where I come from, but then in the different parts of So, since my grandfather was a reverend pastor, I moved with him from one congregation, from one church to the other, but then still within So. So a good part of my life was in So, and I appreciated being in So because I had to learn and connect with my culture, although not sufficient, but at least it gave me the basis for what I can begin to reflect on in life at a later time in my life when I was in the university. And growing up with my grandmother and my grandfather was, I think, very special. I had the pleasure of also experiencing life from different perspectives, the Christianity, tradition, culture, and it was very rich. It was, I wouldn't ask for anything better than that.
So your grandfather was a minister, a reverend, at which denomination?
My grandfather was a reverend pastor with the Presbyterian Church in Cameroon, yes.
Did he talk to you about this situation when the Germans moved in, the colonizers, and they brought in with them, in a very violent way, as we know, colonial rule, but also Christianity, and how him being a pastor, how would he relate to the indigenous religions at that point? How did he see that situation?
Well, when I was growing up with my grandfather, it was, I would say it was very light-hearted. It was more about, there was a lot of focus on me as a person, what I would like to do, what I would like to talk about. But also, it was this strict Christian life where, for example, during the Lent season, you would wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, go to church, come back, do activities, go to the farm, and then in the evening you're in church. So I grew up in that kind of setup. But amazingly, at the same time, I got the opportunity to always go back to my village, the big compounds where we come from. And I experienced rituals that were being performed by either my grand uncles or my great grand uncles, which I had the experience to meet them. However, my grandfather was not very connected with tradition and culture, and I think at the time, to him, two could not coexist. One was light and the other was darkness. He was the rightful heir to the leadership in our smaller community. traditional leadership, but he did not take up that position because he felt that he was called to be a pastor. And so already I grew up knowing that I was a child of God, and that was the most I knew about myself, and very little about my tradition. But also his involvement in Christianity also dated as far back as in the 1940s and 1950s. And he worked with missionaries from Switzerland, Germany. And I don't think that at the time, with what he knew, he didn't have that critical perspective on colonization at the time of my upbringing. And also, I went to school. I would also suppose that that would be the role of an educational institution as well, to give that rightful education where young people can reflect on. Unfortunately, in primary school, there was very little taught to us about colonization. But then in secondary school, there was a lot about the world wars. Cameroon history was thought to have started in the 1880s when colonization started. So as a child growing up till university level, there was no real opportunity for me to reflect on colonial legacies, to reflect on issues of identity from an informed perspective.
So as you grew up with your grandparents or in your community or family at that point, or circle of friends, there was no reflection on the colonial period with Germany. That was not mentioned, was not an issue.
Absolutely not. There could be conversations of maybe German colonial structures that were left behind, for example.
What would that be, for example?
Certain spaces that are now used as medical spaces, like hospitals, which are German structures. It could also be certain government offices that are also German structures that were built or where the German governors lived before. And
would they be referred to? These are sort of legacies of German colonialism. Did you know that the Germans were involved in setting them up?
Yes. The German architecture is very peculiar. It's very unique in Cameroon. It's not like the regular architecture. And so it's quite easy for you to make out that this is a German colonial structures. But the conversations were not really reflective. They were not centered around a deeper look on the devastating consequences of colonialism. They were just referred to as an event in history, so to say, and that was
detached from the specific experience of the Nso people.
Exactly. It was not. It was really never specific about a certain community. It was more or less about these are the structures that were built by the Germans. They've lasted for this long. They are being used for some other purposes now, and it was nothing reflective at all.
Can you recall what was sort of the emotional flavor of these conversations? Or at that point, were there any feelings on your side or when people talked about this German period?
Absolutely no feelings. For me, it was just an event in history that was being recounted. The stories also around these structures were never the focus. How these structures came to be, the context in which these structures were erected, they were never in a conversation. So it was just really like an isolated instance of a German colonial structure here, and that is what it is. There was not more to that than what you could see with your eyes at the time.
So you went through primary and secondary school in the Nso land, right? And then you went on to university in Yaoundé. What did you study? What was your field there?
So when I was in the high school, I'd spoken to my parents very briefly about, what's going to happen next when I graduate from high school, what university. And my parents agreed that the opportunities are more in Cameroon or French expression section of the country, the Francophone part of the country. And they would have loved for me to learn the French language as well, because they believed that that is the only way you can be able to have a lot of opportunities when you speak French, when you're in the French region. And as you already can imagine, that was very confusing for me, because I was in the section of English expression, what they refer to as Anglophone Cameroon in Bamenda. And I had studied in English. I was used to the English system of education. I was used to the English culture, let me put it that way. But I mean, I was interested in the opportunities. I had a big vision for life. I had dreamt of having international opportunities, of having a good job, of being able to reach out to community in a very big way. And this could only be possible if I moved to Cameroon of French expression. And now that I think of it, it was a clear indication that there is a problem with the system in the country, because the opportunities are meant for a certain region and not the other. And this would subsequently lead to what we can now call the Anglophone crisis. When I went to Yaoundé, the other conversation was also that as an Anglophone, although I'm going to be in Yaoundé, I will be taught in French. And I might have to learn French before I start learning the subject, and that could take me like 6 years just for university. And so my parents thought it wise that I should study English modern letters. English modern letters, again, is a colonial subject.
Okay, yes.
Where you're learning how English words, how lexicology, the formation of English words, British English, and all of that doesn't really, it could help in real life, but it's a colonial legacy. And so I studied that for about 2 years. I didn't go anywhere. Like, I wasn't feeling fulfilled. I felt like something was missing. I had, grown up in the English culture, and then I moved to the university to study English as a language. And I left the university, and I told my mom I wanted to do something that is more creative, that I wanted to study web mastery, developing websites, graphic designs. And I went into Power Badge. It's a professional training center, and I studied web designing and graphic designing at the time. And when I graduated, the ICT University was just launched in Cameroon at the time, and I was very interested in development issues. So
what's ICT University?
The Information and Communication Technology University in Cameroon.
Okay, it's like a teaching university.
I joined that, and I studied development and sustainable development and business management for 4 years, and that's how I ended up spending about from 2008 to 2016 in Yaoundé. And still couldn't speak the French, that's the problem.
Okay. So let's move forward then to the cultural organization that you set up, which today is called Regardless. You're the founder and the president. How did this idea occur to you? What was your purpose of taking this step?
So when I studied business management and development, I was very interested in the development part of it. And my reflections were, I studied things like climate change, and I thought to myself, how do you communicate this very difficult concept in a way that local communities can be able to understand, participate, and take ownership of these conversations? And being a creative person who was very skilled with drawing, fashion, writing, I thought to myself that the creative industry or art and culture was a very good way of communicating the issues that are very important to humanity. And so I started Regardless as CC House of Fame at the time, and the purpose was really to find creative and innovative ways of communicating the Sustainable Development Goals to communities. It was about localizing the Sustainable Development Goals through art and culture. And subsequently, we realized that culture had been eliminated or was not a key part of the Sustainable Development Goals, but it was also the foundation for prosperous communities and prosperous societies. And we started building very much on what culture can do to ensure prosperity, to ensure environmental sustainability, but to also ensure that there is peaceful coexistence of humanity. We started reflecting on how can culture be used in local communities among young people to also encourage young people to have these very difficult conversations.
So what are the current programs that you offer through Regardless?
One of the key things we started working on, which came from experience, was the fact that young people, which I was one of the young people, are not very connected to their culture, are not experiencing their culture in its fullness, which cultural rights is also part of human rights. And so we started working on the question of cultural heritage as human right, and which then strongly ties to the question of decolonization, because also communities were disenfranchised from their cultural experiences through colonization. And with the experience we've had with the restitution works we've done so far, we are also helping local communities to ensure that they take ownership of looking for where their heritages are. Once they find them, they also follow the due process to be able to get back their heritages from German institutions. And that to us is very, very important, because we've been able to lead successful campaigns in the question of Ngonso. And so other communities don't need to start from zero. They can build on our failures, the lessons learned, and which we are documenting, and they can build on that to be able to, also have their own restitutions happen. For us, it's very important as an institution to ensure dialogue as well, to facilitate international dialogues, state-to-state dialogues, community dialogues, civil society dialogues, and also to facilitate individual activists and artists who are also in this work of culture, identity.
And you also have a theater group, right?
Yes,
you produced
we do
a theater. Can you talk a little bit about this piece that actually traveled to Douala, right?
Yes.
In connection with the Start Cameroon exhibition produced by Douala Art.
Yes, as an institution, we believe in the power of creative art, and for us, our audience is also the young people. We are having these conversations on decolonization, restitutions, and the young people are not very much involved. And for us, we wanted to communicate in a more creative and fun and exciting and engaging ways with the young people and also the communities that are not informed. And so we developed a theater performance, Shambles of Haunted Africa, which basically focuses on the question of decolonization, but also how it interacts with other issues like racialization, the slave trade, and how it is re-imaging and is being repurposed in contemporary times, and how it's affecting the communities from far back right to this moment. So this theater performance has been performed in several regions in Cameroon. We've had several awards, and we are looking at also bringing this conversation to Germany, this theater performance to Germany.
Well, let's hope this will happen, because I'm sure that so many people will be keen to follow and understand your story better, also through the theater. Yes. Now, you already mentioned Ngonso, and in the next section, we'll dive into the full story of the Ngonso. Thank you so far.
Thank you.
Sylvie, who is Ngonso?
I always feel very honored every time I have to speak about Ngonso. Ngonso, the person, is the founder of the Nsalt people, a brave woman who, in a succession dispute, separated from his two brothers and went through the hurdles to found the Nsalt land. So if I'm here today talking to you, if I can connect to Nsalt, it's because of Ngonso, the founder of the Nsalt people. And an interesting thing about Ngonso, the person, is the fact that after founding Nsalt, it was not a bed of roses. There were insurgencies from militant groups. There were battles that were being fought, and she led these battles and kept bringing together Nsalt people, moved along with the people of Nsalt through famine to be able to settle in what we call today the present Nsalt. And these journeys teach us as Nsalt people valuable lessons that have run through every generation from the founding years of Ngonso. In honor of Ngonso, our founder, the statue of Ngonso was made. And this statue is the only symbol, the only physical symbol that we have of Ngonso. And over time, this statue was very important in the traditional and spiritual rituals of the land performed by the fawn. Ngonso became a key part of the royal caravan of the fawn, and it would be used for rituals, for example, to invoke fertility in the land, to invoke fertility of the soil, and also, importantly, to resolve conflicts whenever there were conflicts either between Nsalt and other tribes or within Nsalt itself.
Let me ask, when did you learn about Ngonso? Or was Ngonso, as this mystical founding mother, is she part of the present day traditions and culture of the Nsalt people? When did you learn about her, for example?
It's such a pity that I studied in Nsalt all my life, and not once did I ever hear about Ngonso in a school setup. However, there was the statue that was a copy of Ngonso that was made and kept in the palace as a reminder to the Nsalt people that the real Ngonso is still somewhere and needs to be brought back to Nsalt Kingdom. And I had not seen it but heard about it, but very casually, like really, really casually. I didn't have a firm knowledge of Ngonso until I was about till 2017, that it really took my interest when I met with Mark, and in an exchange, and he came from Germany at the time.
So that's your collaborator in the film producing.
In the film that we're producing, and he had talked about Ngonso being in Germany, and I cannot say to you that at the time even that meant something very much to me, but it took my interest, but not something that I say it was something that I was very keen on at the time. So it's regrettably so that I learned about Ngonso very much later on in life.
So let's fill in here, Sylvie, that now we're talking about the material representation of Ngonso that was looted by the German colonial troops in the year 1902, and then in the year 1903 was given to the Ethnological Museum in Berlin by a German colonial officer.
Yes.
So that's your focus is now of this campaign to have Ngonso, this representation, returned to the Nso land. And what made you get started in this campaign?
So in 2008, when I moved from Bamenda to Yaoundé, which was moving from Cameroon of English expression, which is minority, 20% of the country, to Yaoundé, which is in the French section of the country, which is 80% majority of the country, I realized that I had the biggest identity crisis of my life. I was surrounded by everything else apart from what I needed. I had known all my life that I was a child of God, and at that time that was failing. It was not sufficient for me. It couldn't help me out with my identity crisis. I had moved from English expression to French expression, and I was surrounded by this French legacy after leaving the English legacy, which are all colonial legacies. And I was shocked when I got to Yaoundé and how I was treated like a second-class citizen in several occasions. And I started reflecting on my identity then, but I didn't have the potential. I would say I was naive at the time. And in 2018, there was a call for project by Jean-Marie Teno, who is a filmmaker, and I was just getting into film.
In Cameroon. He's a Cameroonian filmmaker.
He's a Cameroonian filmmaker based in France. And I thought to myself, but it was all, the films were focused also on the German colonial legacies in Cameroon. And I thought to myself, well, maybe this is an opportunity for me to unravel my multiple identity crises through a film production. And so when I applied, I was selected, and I was really happy that I was selected because it was the first real film project I was going to be on. And the first thing for me was to go back to my grandfather, whom I had grown up with, who raised me, and who was a key part of this identity mystery. And when I met him, we had a very powerful conversation. And in a conversation, he had mentioned to me that he's very regretful of the fact that he did not appropriate the traditional authority role he had to. And he was now coming to the understanding that Christianity actually could coexist with African traditions and culture. And in the conversation, he talked about how the Germans looted Ngonso, which is a powerful traditional and spiritual figure.
That's the first time you heard about the looting of Ngonso?
It was not the first time I heard about the looting.
That's right, Mark had told you about it, but your grandfather corroborated the story. Yes, verified the story.
Yes, and he had expressed in that moment that he would like to see Ngonso return before he passes on. And he was 76, 77 thereabout. And for me, that was a mission that I had to ensure that I fulfill. I took it upon myself then to work on the restitution of Ngonso, but the journey did not start as working on the restitution of Ngonso. I had absolutely no in-depth knowledge, so I had to start by educating myself, by having the tough conversations and reading beyond what the history books taught me to be able to understand fully what I was getting myself into. And yeah, I just knew that I had to bring Ngonso back home.
So you started this campaign, and when and how did you connect with the FON and the traditional authorities of the Nso people to see if they would support or agree with your mission?
I think for me, it was very important, first of all, to be able to establish certain basis for a presentation to the traditional authorities. I had to, first of all, be sure that I was going to them with something valid and something they could really see and approve of, because also I was not the first to start working on Ngonso. And I think the people who started working on this had done a very great job, but the results were not there yet, and it was very frustrating for the traditional authorities and the FON. So I worked on to the point where I knew that I had established very clearly where Ngonso was in Germany. I had come to Germany and I had seen Ngonso. I had established contacts already with the different institutions in Germany, and there was a green light that things could work. And I then spoke to the local authorities and also to the FON did the presentation to the Nsawda president at the time, who unfortunately is of blessed memory now, for me, Stephen. And he then channeled these conversations to the phone, and we had conversations as well on phone, and the phone now issued the official restitution request, which I then presented to SPK. But for me, it was very important to have something very tangible, to be sure that we were speaking to the right people in Germany.
So SPK, we should mention, is the Prussian Cultural Heritage Foundation here in Berlin. So would it be correct to say that the fund sees you as your missionary or as a representative to carry forward the restitution?
Yes. Once I had presented what was on the table and the possibilities of a success mission, he had designated me as his representative and as the ambassador for the restitution of Ngonso and also of other heritages that are in So. So I officially represent him on every conversation that has to do with restitution of Ngonso, and also not just restitution but also reparations and every other conversation, because restitution is just one part of the puzzle.
So how does your work connect with the ongoing activities of other communities within Cameroon? What sort of exchange do you have? Is there some dialogue, some joint activities?
Yes, definitely, because of the successes we have recorded. And also, of course, I always give credit to the failures because we learn from those. We've been able to support different communities in their own, not restitution requests, but in really unraveling the mysteries around their heritages that were looted in colonial context. We have supported the people of Fontem, popularly known as the Bangwa people, with the restitution of their heritages that were used for rituals from Germany and the Netherlands. We've facilitated those restitutions, but from private collections. We have also worked with the people of Mboum in Cameroon to be able to help them, connect them to the German contact point, for them to know where their objects are and for them to initiate a process. We are also working with the people of Oku. We have a couple of communities, about 7 communities that we are working with. And knowledge exchange is very important for us. We believe that what we've done, what we've been through, they don't have to be through the same challenges.
So this is all about the colonial legacies during the German period and the efforts of the specific communities to get their cultural belongings back.
Yes, yes. Okay. And we are also supporting, we contribute to different state documents that are being developed.
Yes, please go into that. How do you relate personally, but also the Nso people, traditional authorities, to the state structures like the restitution committee?
When the restitution of Ngonso the decision was issued, the state of Cameroon created a commission or a committee that is in charge of supporting or facilitating restitutions. We, as a person and as the representative of the fund, I have contributed to the development of the strategic plan in consultations with the director of the National Museum, who is a technical lead who was the technical lead and unfortunately has passed. I have also...
Yeah, he's died a few months ago.
He's died a few months ago. I have also...
Dr. Heumann.
Dr. Heumann, yes. I've also contributed to... I've participated in several meetings organized by the Ministry of Arts and Culture and by this committee. And time to time, I would be called by either the Inspector General or other colleagues in the ministry that need support with either a list or how the conversation is going. So generally, I'm happy to contribute from my experience to ensuring that the commission is also doing their job the way they're supposed to do it. With what I know, I'm always happy to contribute to that.
What would you say, how open is the government, the formal state structures, how open are they to the concerns and the interests of the communities?
I would say, first of all, that the state entity in charge of restitution is open and committed to ensuring that restitutions happen. And
what do you mean, the committee, or is the ministry? In general, you mean the
in
state?
general, exactly,
yes.
because the committee is made up of different ministries. It's an interministerial committee with community members as well. They've demonstrated that they are willing to support restitutions. How fast they are willing to make it happen is the question here. But also how they are involving communities is slow, but it's happening. Communities have been called up once or twice to participate in meetings that have been organized. What I would say is that, to the best of my knowledge, I am not aware of any meeting that has been specifically designed to understand the needs of the communities. There is no meeting yet that to the best of my knowledge, that I have been a part of, or that I have seen a public communique say this meeting is dedicated to that.
So in the next section, we will turn to your interaction with the German side.
Oh, yes, that.
Sylvie, you are presently in Berlin for a workshop with the Ethnological Museum Berlin on the Nso cultural belongings, including Ngonso, held by that particular museum. You are part of a high-ranking cultural delegation. What has been the result of your talk, of the meeting at the museum this week?
I think it's been an incredible time spent in Germany. For the first time, I came to Germany not thinking that I have to wage a war against anything, and not needing to be overly ready to prove a point. We had a presentation which was basically the provenance research presentation by SPK. And I think I really liked how this went. It was about truth finding and truth speaking. And that's been very important. That's been one of the most difficult parts for me in this journey. Having to find the truth and speak it out the way it's supposed to be. One of the key achievements of this workshop has really been the establishment of the colonial violence that led to the acquisition of a set of objects, and I say that in quotes, that are in their keeping.
Well, what's the number? How many so-called objects are we talking about?
I wouldn't want to give a specific number now, because also there is still more research being done and more objects are being uncovered in that research. But we are speaking about collections by the colonial looter Clowning, and it's been established very clearly that these objects were collected in violent circumstances, and Clowning was a violent person. But it was also an emotional moment for me to really look at the figures and the statistics and the language that was used in some reports by Clowning, clearly stating how many people he killed. 700 to 800 people from Saw were killed, and thousands, including women and children, were taken in this punitive expedition as in punishment. And I just couldn't help but imagine and visualize what this meant for these people. what this meant for the Nsawt people and what that continues to mean for the Nsawt people. But these conversations were had in a very polite and respectful ways between the Nsawt people and the museum, and in a very forward perspective, in a forward thinking way. It's not about what we are talking about now, but the future. What next? What should we do next? And the fact that we also had the opportunity to present from our end the importance of these objects that are being held, like the doorpost. We had conversations about
from the palace,
the
doorposts
that
from
were
the
collected
palace.
from the
From the
palace,
palace, yes, looted by the Germans, brought to Berlin.
looted by the Germans and brought to Berlin. The fact that we could also help the museum understand the importance, the spirituality of these doorposts was really very important. I feel like we are now getting into dialogue. I think before we were in a fight, and now for me this is an example of what dialogue should look like. And I wish that for every other institutions that we engage with in the future, or any other community, when they engage, it should be this collective effort and this truth speaking in a way that is respectful of everyone in the room.
Now, the restitution decision by the Board of Trustees of the Ethnological Museum, SPK, of June 2022 only refers to Ngonso. Yes. Did the people from the museum give you some indication how they would look at the other belongings, or are they ready to restitute? What's the sense you got?
I got the sense that there is an openness that is really important in this conversation. For example, the fact that we are able to manage whatever is left in the museum on exhibition in a way that is befitting to the community and in a way that meets the community needs, traditions. For example, we had an installation together of the royal cloth, which was sent by the phone for the objects that are on exhibition to be placed on these.
In the Cameroon room space at the Ethnological Museum, Humboldt Forum.
Museum, yes. So I have the impression that there is the openness. And of course, we all agreed in the room that these objects must also be restituted. And this is because of not just the violent context of acquisition, because of also the importance, the cultural and the spiritual significance that the community was able to clearly establish. It's rather unfortunate that we are still having to establish that, but of course we are happy to establish that at every point in time for the sake of mutual learning. But there is the understanding that these are important to the community and they need to go back. And the next process for us is again compiling the results of this workshop and sharing it with the relevant stakeholders, and then having the museum do their due process for restitutions.
To get a new decision of the Board of Trustees,
and
right,
then,
that
yes,
would be needed
yes,
to let it go. Let's turn to Stuttgart with the Linden Museum. That's
yes,
the museum owned by the state of Baden-Württemberg,
yes,
and the city of Stuttgart. There's a number of looted belongings from the Nsawt at the Linden Museum. The FON looked at it, and you were part of the delegation in November 2022. Where do you stand in relation to the Linden Museum?
2 years back, I would have said that I know where I stood. I would have said that I understood what was going on, and I would have said that we were building this relationship or this working ship that would be mutually beneficial and would really enhance the restitution. But speaking today in 2026, I would say that I'm not sure of anything. I know that we had this working mission to Stuttgart that you mentioned, and we were able to see all the objects in quotes that are in their keeping, and we had worked very closely with the museum through Fiona, and which we
the curator who left the museum by now, yes, Fiona Siegenthaler.
And we gradually built that relationship from nothing to a space where we had mutual respect for each other, and I had really grown to love working with her, and we worked to have this restitution decision for 28 objects that were looted by Huben, because there was this clarity also on the circumstances of acquisition, but also on the importance to the community.
Yeah, that's the decision by the cabinet, by the government of Baden-Württemberg.
Which, strange enough, we've never really had an official decision addressed to anybody. We've had that announced in the newspapers and on websites, but I think we still need an official decision addressed to the FONAMSO, saying that this is the decision. In the preparations for restitution on the side of Cameroon, somehow I came to understand that there was the exclusion of the 28 objects that were agreed upon for restitution, and that they were in the preliminary discussions excluded when the list was sent to Cameroon.
From the German side.
From the German side, and from Linden Museum. The earlier list that was sent to Cameroon did not seem to include the objects that were already having a decision for restitution. And I also guess that it was a little bit difficult for us to also try to make that point to other stakeholders, because we did not have a document addressed to us saying that this list, as mentioned below, has been approved. So we need that document. As at now, Fiona is no longer there. I cannot say where I stand with the Linden Museum currently on the work we've done before, because the intention was also that as the SPK is doing the research on glouning, that same research should be able to apply to Linden Museum as well, and other museums that have holdings from glouning within the same period of time that was collected.
Do you have a feeling or a knowledge on what other museums in Germany would have holdings of cultural belongings from then so?
I know that Leipzig as well has, the Grasse Museum has holdings from SAW, and I had wonderful conversations with former director Leontina. I had the opportunity to visit some of these collections, and I greatly appreciated how reinventing Grasse was also a part of reinventing how SAW heritage was also managed.
Yeah, that's the former director, Leontine Meyer van Mensch, who is now the director of the City Museum in Rotterdam.
Yes, it was very, it was a wonderful time with her, spent with her. She was very open to doing different things together, and also looking at how research doesn't have to start from zero, but also how we can build on existing research by other institutions to enhance our knowledge of the topic, and also to enhance that community wishes are met. But generally, there are other institutions as well. What I have come to learn is that what the book Atlas of Absence, which is very, very relevant, that is not, it's not also exhaustive of what we have elsewhere in Germany. And I'm looking forward to meeting different institutions to see what they have from SAW. And I also appreciate
we could also mention the University of Mainz here.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, you were just going to. Please go
Yes.
ahead. And Anne Brandstetter, the former academic staff there, has been very helpful.
She has been very helpful with Bianca Baumann as well. Both of them have worked together to ensure that they approached us, and it's the first time that an institution approached us and said, look, we have these things from SAW, and we think that we can work towards returning them to you. And
I think there's an official decision by the university, right?
Yes.
To turn over ownership there.
And they worked really hard to also not just ensure that we have the decision, but to make sure that we are actively involved in how these heritages are kept, how they are managed, how they are being shown to the public. For every presentation that they want to make, even the photos that take the permission from the phone. And I find that very, very interesting. And that is something also the Ethnological Museum is doing that I really find interesting. So we are not just ensuring restitutions, but we are rethinking museum practices and also redefining what it means for communities to be engaged in management of their own heritage that is held elsewhere in the world.
What have been your experiences with German civil society organizations in this struggle?
It's been amazing. We've had incredible support from civil society organizations and also individual activists from Germany. Without the civil society and without the individual activists and civil society in Germany, it would really be difficult for us. We wouldn't have been here today. I remember when I started the campaign, you played a very key role, Thomas, in connecting us.
Well, I learned everything from you. You educated me.
It's mutual learning. I learned a lot from you as well. You know, the same role you played and also other civil society institutions. During the protest, we had people come up and support. We had activist movements, Barazani, and now we have this, book by Initiative Perspective Vexel, which is also very important. So
this is this comic novel about you and the Ngonso story.
Yes, which also it's going to be used in educational institutions, which I believe that it's the basis for an inclusive dialogue, which includes not just a privileged few, but also young people who are in school. So civil society has been so helpful, and I've come to learn also the power of civil society from German civil society organizations. The dynamics are not the same Cameroon and Germany, but I can count thousands of lessons that I definitely take from German civil society back to Cameroon.
In the final section, we will turn to the future, the work within Cameroon and the cooperation with the German side.
Yeah.
Looking forward now, I would assume that Ngonso and other cultural belongings of the Nso eventually, within the foreseeable future, will return to Nso. What is the status or the level of preparations? Where do the people of Nso stand? What are they doing now to prepare for this big event?
I'm actually smiling, but with a bit of mixed feelings, because every time I hear mention of Ngonso and then we attribute it directly to Nso and not now Germany, it gives me an instant relief, and then the pressure picks back in again. But the preparation has been going on for more than 2 years, getting to 3 years, and it can be frustrating. In Germany, we are treating restitution as the return of things. In Nso, we are treating restitutions as reconnections, reclamations, reparations, all the re's that you can imagine. And there are institutions that are in charge of reconnection, traditional institutions. There's going to be pre-arrival rituals, arrival rituals, and then post-rituals. In the pre-arrival rituals and also organizations and activities have been set in motion for more than 2 years. And that's emotionally draining for the people. It's about its highs and lows. We get so excited that, oh, it's this year. And then we put all the resources together. People travel from one region to the other, and then the lows come in when we hear, okay, it's not this year. 2025, we had people traveling from all over to get to Yaoundé for preparatory meetings. We had people travel already to Nsawam from their respective destinations to prepare for rituals. And we have dance groups that are getting themselves together. We have Nsawam artists who are already, curating wonderful performances, waiting for restitutions. We have the women's groups that are the key people in this return that are already ready and just waiting for Ngonsor to come. Everybody is ready, except for the fact that Ngonsor is not there. And that really frustrates people. Me personally, I'm frustrated, super frustrated. I don't mind being patient. I don't mind that the restitution of Ngonsor is no longer just for the Ngonsor people, but this is now a global initiative. And I don't mind that it opens the way for other restitutions to Cameroon and even to Africa. I'm willing to be patient for that to happen. But also, I'm frustrated watching my people get frustrated without adequate information. And there's just so much a community can take. And then there is the hopes that the restitution brings. There's the hope for peace to return once Ngonsor is coming back. And people get into this mood, start developing the institutions, putting the resources out there, and then it doesn't happen. But generally, we are ready.
Looking at the steps of the restitution process, now the basis for the return of any cultural belongings to Cameroon will be an agreement between the government of Cameroon and the German government, which, by the way, to my knowledge, has come about through the request of the Cameroonian government, because they want to be in the central position for the whole thing. So presumably then the first step would be for Ngonsor to travel to Yaoundé, to the National Museum of Cameroon, or how do you see it happen? What's your understanding how eventually Ngonsor would be returned to Nsawam land?
Yeah, I'm just reflecting again on the state-to-state negotiations and next steps that are now holding us back. And of course, Ngonsor crossed international borders, and it should be treated as such. The state of Cameroon is relevant, but in facilitating the restitutions, I see a situation where whenever they are ready, they would say, you can now bring Ngonsor back, and this return will leave Berlin to Yaoundé and then stay in Yaoundé for some time and then back to the community.
Is that what the government told you, or is it your expectation?
I mean, the committee is lobbying for that to happen, and we really don't have a problem with that. Also, because Yaoundé would be a central point for sort of people to also come and reconnect and commune with Ngonsor when she arrives. And also when she arrives Cameroon, the reinstating rituals are not yet done in Yaoundé, they must be done in Nsawam. So it's okay for other people to see, for other communities. We cannot deny the fact that she's become an international symbol. So she will get the due respect and attention in Yaoundé, and then she will return home. That is clear that she's going to go back home. The traditional institutions in charge of that are already working on that. Infrastructural development is currently ongoing.
Like what? Yeah, can you refer to the museum? I was told that by Dr. Boulami in the previous podcast that there is a museum. There are plans to construct a museum. Can you go into that, please?
Of course, there are plans to construct a museum, and there is a long-term plan. But the immediate plan also is not for Ngonsor to be in a museum. And even the long-term plan, she's not going to be in a museum. The traditional institutions are getting ready where this is going to happen. I would go to Dr. Bulami's terminology of shrine instead of a museum, which is more of a shrine that connects to the people, the culture, the royal palace, and that's quite important to note. But I think it's also important to mention that it's time for Germany to start looking at restitution beyond consort living Germany. It should also be about how do the people reintegrate consort back into communities. How can the German institutions also support for reconnection? Because reconnection is not just about taking the object, placing it here, and then it's done. There is a process of reconciliation. There is other traditional things that need to be done. And yeah, I think one of my focus this year is also to ensure that the German institutions, the state of Germany, formally acknowledges these colonial crimes that were committed in Cameroon.
What could that look like, the formal acknowledgement? What would you expect the German government to do or to say in this respect?
I would expect that the German government issue an official statement acknowledging the crimes, acknowledging the impact on the people, and also expressing the willingness to, I would not say amend, but to engage very constructively with the state and communities in redressing or addressing these colonial crimes. But that also looks to me like constructive action, and I cannot tell them what they should do action-wise, but I expect action to support this official statement that is being issued. I also expect Germany to really go to Cameroon a lot this time, and not Cameroon coming to Germany, because that I'm very tired of. I also expect Germany to initiate reconciliation and facilitate things. It's been the burden for Cameroon to do that, but if we show the goodwill, we also expect Germany to cue in and also be proactive.
Do you have concrete ideas of how German civil society could be involved in this process of restitution, but beyond, collaborating into the future?
Of course, the civil society is super important in the restitution processes, but not just that. In this whole question of confronting the colonial past, civil society in Germany should continue to educate the German community, the German population. I think that once people get to know and understand in Germany to what extent these colonial crimes impacted communities and to what extent they continue to impact communities and what they can do, then it's going to be building a global movement. It's very important, educating the German community. I appreciate the efforts that are being done already. I also expect more, and I also expect the German civil society to create a nexus, a connecting point also between civil society in Cameroon and civil society in Germany, the meeting point, and that's something I think Flaubert is doing.
Flaubert Jateng of the Zenu Network. Yes, a youth organization in Cameroon.
Which is very important to create that connection between civil society in Cameroon and civil society in Germany, and also to push for things to be done appropriately, to push for the government not to look at restitution just as a return of things, but to broaden their understanding and action to other areas that connect with restitution.
Yes, thank you very much for your insights and for this very deep conversation, Sylvie. Congratulations for your journey so far and all this, what you have been able to succeed to push to promote this initiative, to make us understand about the legacies of German colonialism. It will be really fascinating to see how this journey continues, and let's all work for the point when we'll begin to celebrate things are really happening.
Thank you so much for always supporting, and I'm very happy to be here today speaking with you. And I hope that the next time we talk about this should be in Cameroon when we're celebrating the return of Gansar and other objects from Cameroon.